and stricter vehicular checks. So each of these, and there are many more, are examples, whether in policy, industry, or infrastructure, which reinforces one truth: when leadership aligns with intent, progress follows. But this is just the beginning and a drop in the ocean. So if we try to look for some real inspiration of what has shown tangible results and has worked, it has been mentioned by a couple of speakers earlier in the day, the example of Beijing. So the government's Blue Sky campaign, enforced with industrial reforms and cleaner fuels, cut the particulate matter by 35% in just 5 years. In Mexico City, where air pollution was once so severe that birds would fall mid-flight, collaborative action between regulators and industry helped reduce the carbon monoxide by 86%, ozone by 53%, and particulate matter by 32%, even as the number of vehicles doubled. And in Bangkok, where over half of the particulate matter emissions came from transport, the government partnered with private operators to upgrade fleets and introduce Euro 6 standards and ultra-low sulfur fuels. These cities did not wait for miracles. They built momentum through policy, partnership, and persistence, which somebody very rightly today called political will. In 2021, SERB conducted Pakistan's first baseline study on business and air quality. It found that while many large organizations already comply with environmental standards, it's the informal sector, thousands of small workshops, kilns, and units which remain outside the accountability net. Insights from studies such as these have helped shape our understanding of what real impact can come from. Our next step must be to embed collaboration into the country's environmental framework, to move from isolated efforts to a shared strategy. That is why what I am proposing is the creation of a National Clean Air Forum, a permanent platform where government, industry, academia, and NGOs collaborate, share data, and co-design practical solutions, a space where research meets regulation, where the public and private sectors build trust and work together towards one common goal of clean air for the future generations of Pakistan. PBC will be happy to offer its services as required as a convener. So what needs to be done? What needs to be done is expand the monitoring networks, connect public and private air quality systems nationwide, engage the informal sector, offer support and encourage compliance gradually, inclusion is extremely important. Leverage green finance, enable small and medium-sized enterprises to upgrade responsibly. Support sectors which we know are a challenge, but also have the greatest potential, such as agriculture, which could generate over 7 billion in sustainable exports each year. Reward green investments. Pakistan's formal sector already drives most of the country's growth and tax contribution. It should be seen as a partner in this transition, encouraged through measurable incentives, not additional burdens of taxes and regulations. Government can unlock real impact by rewarding responsible businesses and working with them to support others. Ensure transparency so citizens can see in real time who is helping clean the air and who isn't. Progress and partnership will depend on how well we turn individual efforts into collective momentum. If we align these efforts across the formal and informal sectors and between government and industry, Pakistan can shift the global narrative from one of pollution to one of progress. We have the knowledge, we have the partners, we have the will. Clean air will not come from courage, it will come from ownership. And ownership begins here, among those who have the power to act and influence to lead. Because at the heart of this is not policy or technology, it's people. It's our parents, it's our children, and it is us. It's the air children breathe. It's the future we owe them. Partnership is not just our path forward, it is our proof of progress. If we align our data, our policy, and our purpose, we can clear the haze not only over our skies, but over the nation's priorities as well. Let's leave behind clearer skies and a clearer sense of responsibility. Thank you.
We will now hear our second keynote address from Asif Beg Mohammed, Chairman of the Board of Management, Pakistan State Oil.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here. The question, can we have the presentation first?
Okay, the question that we were asked to address is clean air a possible reality? Slide. On the left is Beijing a few years ago. This is Beijing today. The point is, if they can do it, absolutely Pakistan can do it. Okay, now the question is, how do we get there? Next slide. What we propose is since the morning, what I've been hearing is, we're waiting for government funding, we're waiting for somebody else to do something. My humble submission is, let's try to see what we can do. And I think the way we can do it is by making it profitable for the people that are needed to do it. Slide, please. Last year, 16,800 megawatts of rooftop solar was installed. With 16,800 megawatts, we were the #1 rooftop solar installer in the world. And this has changed the dynamics of electricity production in Pakistan. Okay. What PSO is doing is,
What we have done is we've also been looking at how do we change our processes and how can we make things so that it is
more sustainable as well as it is more profitable. We took 760 processes of our company and we've reduced it to 430. We have digitized them and this has resulted, This has resulted in a 60% productivity and a 400% increase in profit. And that's the key word. It has to be profitable. What we have, please, go back, please. Okay. What we have done basically is because we sell billions and billions of liters, what that has also done is the small percentage that we have saved, that has resulted in a huge increase, a huge saving in environmental costs. Slide, please. PSO has already started solarizing its stations, and at the same time, we've started an EV network. It is in the initial stages right now, but as time will, through time, we will be expanding this network, and hopefully this will become a major portion of our success. Slide. What PSO is focusing on is the first stage was solar panels. We believe that the next stage is going to be BESS. Why? As we have solar panels and solar production is excess in the day, but we need this excess production to move to night. And as it moves to the nighttime, you need BESS. What PSO has done is we have signed up with the top 3 technology providers in the world. Number 1 for lithium-ion batteries, number 2 for solid-state batteries, and number 3 for supercapacitors. As these technologies come into play, rather than the second or third line vendors that are currently supplying the Pakistan market, we will be supplying with the number 1, the cutting edge technologies into BESS. This will also result in what we're also doing is we're putting in mini grids, and we're trying to, once the policy of the government comes out, we're going to be taking the excess solar power or any other power and wheeling it to places where they need the power. Slide. What's 40%? Okay. I want to just share a couple of numbers. When CNG came in, it was 40% cheaper than the normal fuel, and the whole of Pakistan flocked to this. So we have a number. At 40%, things become very, very attractive. So what we are focusing on is how do we get 40% reduction and 40% in the consumer price. And what we want it for is for the 180 million people that ride 2- and 3-wheelers and buses. We're not talking about cars. Cars, we are putting the EV charges, as you saw. However, what we're really trying to focus in, how do we get a 40% reduction in the transport bill of the consumer for the next 10 years? This 40% reduction in the consumer will also mean a 40%
reduction in our import of oil, because 45% of our oil bill, of our sales is motorcycles and 3-wheelers. So if we can make this green, this dramatically reduces the 2- and 3-wheeler need. And as this becomes clean, obviously it becomes clean air, which helps our environment. Now, the issue over here, we've had a lot of people talk about financing, but we feel that one of the key bottlenecks over here is the fact that banks do not give financing to these people to change over. And remember one thing, we're not talking about small initiatives. There are 30 million 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers in Pakistan. So turning out 10,000 or 20,000 really doesn't do it. 10 and 20,000 is a rounding error. What we need is a way to dramatically move these vehicles into the market, and what PSO will definitely do is we'll make sure that that 40% drop in cost is there, but we need the partners on the other side to make sure that there is demand for this. Next. Okay. What we're also doing is delivery platforms. Okay. We have launched Vibe. Vibe is our stores. These are seed certified, which means that basically it's made out of recycled material. It means that it uses every water that goes there is recycled, the oil that comes there is recycled, and the cost of running is 20% less. Now, these Vibe stores, by the end of next year, as well as other stores, will be the largest retail chain of Pakistan. And to support this, what we're adding in there are 2 other things. One is e-commerce. And our e-commerce platform is going to be launched, which means you can pick up from these stores, or it will be delivered to you. One of the key things we've seen is there are 100,000 delivery boys in Pakistan. And we are working right now in trial projects with TCS and with others to turn them into e-bikes and e-deliveries. Now what that does is, again, that 40% reduction in cost. So they get the reduction in cost, and we propose that this reduction in cost be used partially to repay the banks to get the motorcycles or the 3-wheelers to them. And what
what we're also adding is dark sites. So basically, these 100,000 delivery boys, what we're going to be trying to do over the next couple of years is move them from the sites that they're right now. Everybody has 10 or 15 dark sites per company. We have 3,667 dark sites. So with 3,667 dark sites, we believe that effectively we will dominate the delivery mechanism in Pakistan. And as that comes in, with the 2 and 3 wheelers will move to us, and we'll be able to reduce the cost for the consumer. And obviously that means we'll be able to reduce the cost of delivery, which will hopefully help the consumer at the end. Next. There's one last initiative that we're doing. We believe one of the things we're doing as CSR is we're trying to make urban forests. And we were very inspired by what China did, especially in the Gobi Desert. What every single year the desert was expanding. And what they did was they brought in a plant-a-tree program, and they got 400 million trees planted by citizens. I do believe that PSO will come in along with local governments, and we will help in setting this up, provided we find a mechanism by which, in the future, that there is no government or our funding to run it, so that it should be privately run and run in such a way that it's sustainable. So we will help put the trees in, we will help develop it, but we believe that the people that are good citizens should be running it. Next. What we do want to commit is that PSO is committed to a clean air Pakistan. Next. Pakistan, we believe, is at the verge of extreme success based on 2 factors. One, the cost of energy is dropping, especially as you're seeing in solar. It's headed to a very, very small number. Along with it, there's tremendous increases in computational power at a very fractional price with AI. We believe with both these things, Pakistan has the opportunity to jump ahead of a lot of the Western world, in fact, that will be stopped by processes. We believe that with this jump, Pakistan's future is bright, and we hope, and we will be working for that PSO will be the beacon of hope and progress for Pakistan. Pakistan Zindabad. Thank you very much.
We will now invite the chair of the panel, Rumina Khurshid Alam, coordinator to the Prime Minister on climate change. The panelists for this session are Ali Zaidi, General Manager, Marketing and Brands, Omoda and Jeku, Nextgen Autos, Nishat Group, Commercial Lead, Mariam Durrani, Director, Marketing and Brand, Pakistan Cables, and Kazim Said, CEO, Pakistan Agriculture Coalition.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. क्या आप सब जाग रहे हैं? नहीं, मुझे लग नहीं रहा. Could you please clap for yourself, please? थोड़ी जोर से करें ना. Great audience. Thank you very much. Thank you. And hats off to you. मैं जब यहाँ बैठी हुई थी आगे तो कहीं कानों में छोटी-छोटी खबरें वो क्या बातें खबरें नहीं क्योंकि dawn है तो जाहिर है we can talk about the news. But it's a great honor for me, and I warmly welcome to my all the 3 panelists, worthy panelists who are sitting over here, and I really want to appreciate all the amazing crowd, which is very seriously not only listening. In fact, they're passing few comments that, like I was just listening, small things like small words not means things, of course, the great things which you all are sharing, because this is something, of course, very serious. Once again, I really wanted to congratulate Dawn Media Group, Mr. Shakil and his all team, everybody, because this is one of the dream which we have saw and the vision which couldn't be complete without the support. And all those medias who work for this cause, I think great hats off to them. So now, getting back to the subject, as we all know that today we are talking about on smog, air pollution, of course. So I strongly believe that smog is no longer just a seasonal, inconvenience. Because previously we do hear this, that smog is something which is a seasonal inconvenience. It comes and it goes, but it is a national emergency which unfolding before our eyes. It chokes our cities and disrupts our economy and silently steals our people's health. Not only people's health, and and on a very serious note, I really wanted to talk about the children as well, who suffered a lot, and more than that, they are unable to even play. So, that is moreover a human rights issue as well. This crisis demands that we move beyond temporary fixes and begin to address the roots, from transport and industry to agriculture and urban planning. Today, our goal is not to assign blame, but to find the direction. To understand who is the biggest contributors and who are how together with each other can become part of the solutions. How we can, because it's somehow this way or that way, it is our habit that we do talk about or to put the blame game, but I think it's more important now that every individual matters a lot. How we can support, how we can work with each other, because the fight against smog is not just about clean air. It is about the kind of future we want to breathe in. So that's the reason we are in the conference of Dawn of Breathe In. So now getting back to my worthy panelists, I hope you all are fine and you had a long day and waited long. So my first I just wanted to say a small interaction, and I wanted to learn more from you along with my audience. So my first question is from Mr. Ali Zaidi, who is the General Manager Marketing to Omerta and Jayco, Naxygen Autos by Nishat. So transport emissions are among the largest contributors, as we all know, to Pakistan's urban smog. The shift to electric mobility is often Pakistan's, we described in a way as inevitable. But how realistic is that, this shift in Pakistan context? What barriers from infrastructure to affordability do we need to, and in which way, how we can overcome to make EVs mainstream within the next 5 years? Over to you, Mr. Ali.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So first of all, the reality of air pollution and climate change. I was just sitting there talking to people, and 4 months of Mytica made it very real for me, because I had 4 months of allergies. That is something that is not facing us. We go through it every winter, and it's approaching pretty soon. 33% is the share of emissions from vehicles in Karachi and 35% in Lahore. This is a huge chunk. So the question is not whether we would be able to make EV viable, or NEV as we would like to say it, viable in the next 5 years. It is more of a statement that we have to, for all our sakes. Now how to? It has to be sustainable. Because if it is not sustainable, it cannot run it on itself. So it has to make business sense. It has to make sense for those who are going to adopt to it. And when we talk about EV, it is new energy vehicles, which is EVs, PHEVs, and HEVs. All of them reduce the emissions to a larger extent. So there are 5 basic pillars that we believe if we hold them true, we'll be able to achieve the 2030 vision of the government, which is 30% of the vehicle share, pie of the market. The first pillar is consumer-centric products. You know, you said it in your note that price is a big factor. This is a price-sensitive market. So we have to make sure that we account for that. Second is, how can we facilitate the consumer? Have products that already have air filters in them, so that their short term is also secured. That's a great sell. Thirdly, with EV comes range anxiety. So give products that have big range, like 1200 kilometers, for example. That's one angle. Second is behavioral change. And I understand even the speakers before us have been talking about it in different capacities. But I'll give you a very specific example. You know, our behaviors are based on our patterns and habits. So if a petrol user goes to a pump and gets refueled, he'll always think in terms of petrol. He'll say, okay, fine, I'll get an EV charger at the station. That will be such a hassle. What they're missing is that they can charge it at home. So that kind of thinking needs to change. Third is skin in the game. The big industry players need to have a consistent strategic vision and commitment to it. So CKD projects, factories that assemble over here, so that you're in it, rather than just bringing products. The fourth and a huge bit is the policy bit. You see, in the gist of things, we have to make EV more friendlier to the consumer. We have to make it more viable, price sensitive. Even, for example, Mr. Zafar Masood is sitting there. A policy that gives better loans for EVs or PHEVs at better rates. 3 million is the cap, perhaps increase that, so that people can afford it. And for two-wheelers as well. And the fourth bit is infrastructure. Because, I mean, there have been case studies, and I was just recently studying Nepal, where EV is shooting up. Because they have such policy making that for everyone EV is cheap. So they're adapting. But Pakistan, from Karachi to Punjab, is like many miles away. So we will need that infrastructure as well. All of these combined, once again, there is no choice. We have to do it for all ourselves. So, and I think this is a very positive, place we are in, where the government, the banks, the industry, the consumer, the media, all are at one place, and we are talking about it. We just have to make sure that we have the roadmap and we stick by the milestones.
Thank you very much. That's really great, and I think you have very rightly, you have put the light on that, or policy infrastructure. Of course, we all know the policies are there. Now recently, policy has also been there, then infrastructure. Thinking need shift. That, that is sometimes we think for a small things, and in that small thing, that benefit, we forgot about the biggest, solution or benefit. I would just wanted to say that you said the cheap, but I think we should need to change little word, what it comes if cheap, rather than by using the word cheap, it would be more better to use affordable.
Absolutely, price sensitive.
Yeah, because I think sometimes few people, they're like who are a bit conscious, they were going to say that, oh, cheap, it means it's cheap. So I think it's better to say that it's affordable. Anyways, thank you very much, Mr. Ali. Now getting towards Madam Mariam Durrani Saiba, who's the Director Marketing and Brands Pakistan Cables. I really warmly welcome you, my dear. I just wanted to ask, or in fact wanted to learn from you, that of course we know that industry often gets cast as the villain in the smog narrative. villain, you know. So I'm sorry it's been said, so I'm saying, I'm not saying villain, but it's coming like this in a way. So the smog narrative, but it can also be the most powerful part of the solution as well. How can the private sector take the lead in decarbonizing operations, investing in cleaner technologies, circular production, and emission reduction without waiting for government regulations to force and towards the shift? So here it you go.
Thank you very much, Ramana. That's a big question. And I realize the weight on my shoulders because I'm supposed to be the voice of the manufacturing sector of Pakistan, right? The big guns, the villains, as you put it. But you also said very rightly that while we may have been part of the problem, we are also an active part of the solution. And since morning I've been hearing this point repeatedly from a lot of speakers here that the private sector needs to play its part. The truth is the private sector has already started playing its part, and the private sector had been playing part for a very long time. Maybe we have not been doing a very good job of promoting it. And I'll tell you why private sector was forced to do its part. It's primarily because at the end of the day, manufacturing sector or players in the manufacturing sector, if I was to just talk about the organized sector right now, which accounts for about, I think, 60% of the 13% GDP that the manufacturing sector is contributing into Pakistan. I think at the end of the day for businesses, competitiveness, profitability, and sustaining business is important. And the kind of macroeconomic instability that Pakistan has been experiencing in the last few years, and particularly in the last 2 years, the economic shocks that we have been experiencing, businesses are forced to think about operational efficiencies, right? And I think that is what makes it very exciting, because when you talk about cleaner technologies, the newer technologies that are all about manufacturing, etc. Thank you. Are by default focused on, adding to efficiencies of the business, but are also already pro-environment. So, for example, if I was to talk about Pakistan Cables, where I work, we have recently set up a new factory at Nooriabad. We moved from our old plant inside Karachi, and now we have moved to Nooriabad. And I think when we were planning for it back in 2018, the first thing that we did was we started planting trees at the site, the area. We actually set up the first urban forest on an industrial estate, and we planted 50,000 trees because the vision was that, before even the construction starts, there should be trees, because it was an arid land. It was dry, it was hot, and I remember when I went into that area, I was like, how are we going to even construct a factory here? But we started with that thinking. When it came to new machines or equipment, one of the key aspects was looking at the fact that whether these machines are going to be operational on hybrid fuels or, cleaner energy options, because the cost of manufacturing in Pakistan is rising, right? And you all, I have a distinguished audience here, my panelists know it. What are the reasons behind those rising operational costs? Higher cost of capital, devaluating rupee, so many reasons, right? So keeping all of that in mind, you have to take those intelligent decisions. So the private sector or the manufacturing sector per se has been forced to take those calls for the better. Now, the interesting part is that our government also in the last 3-4 years has become active on this front, especially after the aftermath of the floods that we saw in 2022, so on and so forth. And I think that the manufacturing sector of Pakistan has been calling on, on the government too, looking for active avenues where the public and the private sector can collaborate. But I'll tell you what my read is on that, and that is that there has been a lot of conversation. There are isolated good examples, and I can start quoting you examples from the private sector also and the public sector too, by the way, right? You've been seeing what the government of Punjab has been doing, and Sindh is so hungry right now for things like this. But I still think that there is a big gap in terms of, the kind of action plans that need to be rolled out that are profitable and beneficial. Because we all can sit over here and talk till the end of the day. We can talk about fantastic, robust policies, but policies without acknowledging our economic realities, are no good. And I think that's why if we're saying that this is a movement that's in motion, I mean, just like Dawn Breathe Pakistan, I know I sit on the ESG committee at the OICCI. We have been doing these climate conferences for the last 3 years. We invite the private sector, the public sector, the activists. I was listening to Rafi Alam just now, and he made some very good, strong points. But I still think that the kind of robust action plans that needed to come still haven't come. And I can assure you that the private sector is ready for it. Last but not the least, I want to acknowledge that the ACCP this year has made it mandatory to report, and disclose, the emission targets, etc., as per the IFRS 1 and 2 accounting standards. That's a great step. But I think that's something that they should have started 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And businesses are ready. Businesses are conforming. We're saying that's fantastic because that's going to open us to international markets. That's what the international buyers are looking for, compliant businesses. So great opportunity, and yes, we are definitely part of the solution.
Thank you. Very well said. I think you have very rightly pointed so that isolation, and I think moreover it's important that the coordination among the industries and all that, that is also something where not we can make the profitable things as well, and we can manage on the macro and micro level as well and look forward towards betterment. Thank you very much, dear. Now my question to Mr. Kazim M. Saeed Saab, who's the CEO, Pakistan Agriculture Coalition. I just wanted to learn as well by asking this question from you, that every winter crop, residue burning turns large part of Punjab into a smoke corridor. Farmers often say they have no affordable alternatives. What scalable and economical viable solutions can help shift this practice? Can public-private partnership technology interventions provide a path that is both farmer-friendly and climate-smart? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Romina. I'd just like to give a little bit background. I know you don't want to call farmers villains, but a lot of people think that polluters are villains. I just want to convince you that farmers are definitely not the villains in this. They may be the anti-hero of the story. Generally, in public policy, the focus, the right alignment of policy for the public at large and individual interest, they should be aligned. And in this case, the public policy interest is that there shouldn't be burning, but farmers are burning the rice crop particularly. Why is that individual interest coming out the way against the public interest? So let me give you a little bit background. This practice is not happening for every crop. And it's not happening all year round for both the major harvests of the year. It's only happening in the winter. If we go back 20 years, 25 years, there are folks in the audience who will remember there wasn't this problem before. And 20 years ago was this simple world of only wheat being harvested with large harvesters and the rice crop being cut by hand. Can you believe it? 2005, 2003 in Punjab, people were cutting the wheat crop by hand in the 21st century. Now, with the global experience is that whenever you have a shortage of labor in rural areas is when mechanization really picks up. It doesn't just pick up because government gives subsidies. It picks up mainly because there's shortage of labor. And the shortage of labor in the rural areas, especially around harvest time, has been getting more and more extreme over the last few decades, but last couple of decades particularly. And so, since there weren't rice harvesters available, and this is the tragedy of the farmer in Pakistan, that the farmer is blamed for taking action which is forced by the lack of facilities, lack of modern seed, the yields are so low, costs are going up, etc. This is not stuff that the farmer can control. So the farmer did not have access to specialized rice harvesters. So which harvesters were available? The wheat harvesters. And the wheat harvesters, the simple thing to understand is that the wheat harvesters cut at about 15 inches because the wheat, the chaff is 15 inches above the soil. And what you really need in rice is 4 inches or something so that the next crop can be done. Now this difference, 15 inches, 4 inches, this is the central to the problem. Because the wheat harvesters started to be used. I remember 7 or 8 years ago in Punjab, people were observing that the rice harvest used to be about 6 weeks or so, from around the 1st of November to about the 10th of December. And it shrank within a few seasons to 20 days because the harvesters were being used, whether they are new, whether they are right for rice or not, the harvesters were being used. And it saves the farmer a lot of time as well. So they took it. But as different from wheat, where the straw is useful for cattle, and it sells as well. So if you apply some money to labor to cut it out, it will sell. So you will recover your cost. Unlike that, rice straw is not used for cattle, not suitable for cattle. And so that, if it's cut at 15 inches, it has to be burned. What would you do? It's what I ask. What would you do if you were in that situation? The costs have been going up for the farmer. The yields have not been going up. We have to do a lot of work on seed still. So the solution is to burn. And there is a better solution available. Rice harvesters are there, but they are expensive. The new ones are expensive. The Asian Development Bank did a very comprehensive survey in Punjab a couple of years ago for mechanization, and they asked the average age of the wheat harvesters in Punjab that people are using. The average age was 37 years. 37 years. So they are already done 20 years in another country, and then they've been running for 17 years in our country. So you can't expect the results, and it's not the right harvester anyway. These rice harvesters are expensive. We've done a lot of discussions with government saying, let major corporate players of Pakistan come in and provide this service. And they don't have issues of access to capital. Farmer will get a few more monds every acre if the rice harvesters are used for rice. Yeah. And so farmers will pay. But I think this is where, in policy school, Rumina, they teach you about good practice, good policy, and good politics. So it's good practice to have the rice harvester. Yeah. It's good policy to try to finance some large-scale, large players for this, but it's not good politics. Because in the end, the decision that comes out, and I'm being a little bit flippant here, but this is really, I think, how to understand it. When the policy decision comes down to the politics, it's the optics of giving a handful, 100 harvesters to big companies who can really do the job and get it done and get loans, etc., for them and make it a sustainable business versus the optics of giving 10,000 small machines, which may not be the right ones, to small farmers. Always the small farmer option wins. And maybe that's good, but it's still not solving the problem. So I'll stop here if you think that gives out.
Yeah, I got it.
I can go on, but
yeah,
stop.
No, I really believe that's really amazing. Very well, rightly a point, and I think these are the things where we all need to be together and learn. That's the reason I said that I really wanted to learn, because of course that can also help me and people like me more. Well, in the end, I really wanted to thankful to my great panelists who are very short, relevant, and focused. I hope it is going to give a great benefit to the people who are sitting over here. In just closing, I just wanted to say that Pakistan's struggle against smog, when we say, is not just an environmental challenge. It is a test of our, of course, governance,
our innovations, and our collective consensus and consciousness as well. Every breath we take today carries the weight of decisions left too long undone. But I have a faith, because this nation has never bowed to adversity, from floods to droughts, from crisis to recovery. We have always found the strength to rebuild. Now we must find the same resolve to reclaim our skies. Clean air is not a luxury. It is a constitutional right, a public duty, and a patriotic responsibility of all of us. Let's remind ourselves that every policy we frame, every industry we regulate, and every habit we change is a step forward, protecting our children's right to a future free from the haze of neglect. The battle for clean air begins with awareness, with responsibility, but must end with action. And that action must start now, because it's now or never. And I always say one thing, and I also wanted to say it today again as well. In the end, it's not a matter of I or you. It's a matter of us. So us together, we can build a better and great future. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Thank you very much, my great panelists.
Thank you. We now move on to our next session, Judicial Activism and Litigation for Clean Air in Pakistan. We will begin in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience as we prepare for the next session.